Hello everyone, my name is Allison Jones. I'm an outreach coordinator with Virginia Agriculture in the Classroom. If this is the first video you've watched, I would recommend first going to the resource overview presentation with Tammy Maxey. This will give you a full rundown of what our organization offers and details all of our online resources and other opportunities such as our grant program and our teacher mailings. So today I'm showing you two lessons taken from our online database under the Teacher tab of the website. At an in-person training, we would guide you and your colleagues through these lessons in hands-on, sort of a learn-by-doing approach. As that is not really possible at this time, I will do my best to demonstrate and explain the activities so that you can see them as a tangible resource to implement in your classes. As you are able to, you can also follow along with the lessons that are being discussed. The links to these lessons can be found in the description box below, along with any other resources that I may reference during this presentation. Also, for future reference, this video will be found on our channel feed, but it will be permanently housed in our professional development playlist. So this playlist is going to be updated ever so often as we are continuing to grow and add to that bank of resources. We understand that we're living in challenging times, and you all as educators have a very difficult job to do. We want to offer content and resources that can be of best service and support to you as educators, and also supports the students and the families that you serve. At the conclusion of this presentation, we will leave you with a way to get in contact with us should you have questions or need extra support. So our first lesson comes out of our most recent collection of lessons and activities for elementary learners. This is called Sprouting Success. It is a collection of lessons that connect children to food and their basic needs, but it also teaches and/or reinforces essential core concepts and Virginia SOL standards. You can download the entire PDF for free from our website, and I would suggest saving it to your computer, or you could print it out, hole punch it, and put it in a binder. That way you have it as a quick reference and for quick copies. The lessons in this book vary in topic from scientific investigation to natural resources, math, life processes, germination. So there's a lot here and a little bit of everything. Our first lesson is called Resource Roundup, and it is found on page 4 of the Sprouting Success Guide. So Sprouting Success helps children to establish a real-world connection to their food. This is really a large-scale matching activity that can involve a whole class or a small group, just sort of depending on the constraints and your classroom's feasibility. This lesson can also be led during video conference classes, and I'll leave a link down below to the virtual version of Resource Roundup. So this lesson also requires students to use reasoning and team discussion to identify common agricultural resources around the state of Virginia. And then they correlate those resources to the base products and byproducts that come from that resource. So through this lesson, we touch on the classification of living things, Virginia's natural resources and renewable versus non-renewable resources, the cycle and transfer of energy from the sun, and the interdependency of plants and animals and other natural resources. And maybe most importantly, as humans, our responsibility to understand that not only do we rely on these resources, but we are responsible for them, and that we can have a positive or a negative impact on them. So we will begin this lesson by showing students a map of Virginia. In the Sprouting Success Guide, there is a map in the appendix. You might also decide that you would like to use the interactive map that is on our website. Both of these maps actually do highlight the different regions of Virginia. So this might be something good to bookmark for other lessons and activities that you have throughout the school year. So you can give this map to students in a photocopy form, or you can project it in front of your class. But ultimately, let's just go ahead and start identifying some of the pictures that we see on the map. So I see pumpkins, apples, eggs, I see cattle, I see corn, I see trees and pigs, cotton, fish. So they can see the wide variety of commodities that are grown around Virginia. For students who have had some experience with geography, you could ask them, why do you think some things are more commonly produced in one part of the state and not others? There's a great opportunity there for discussion on different landscapes, rock types, soil types, topography, and even fresh versus saltwater products. And it can start with a simple discussion about, well, why is it that we can get oysters on the Chesapeake Bay but not in Southwest Virginia? Or why is it that the highest concentration of different plants or crops that are grown come from the southeastern part of the state and not a part of the state that has more mountains? So now that the students are familiar with some of the common agricultural resources around the state, it will be time to transition to the hands-on portion of the lesson. So in the appendix, again, of the Sprouting Success Manual, you will come to a series of photos. And these are pictures of 15 different Virginia resources. Now, all of these commodities are among the top 20 commodities grown in the state of Virginia. You can print these out as a one and done sort of thing, or you can print them out on better quality paper with better ink and laminate them to keep. You will also have a bag of raw products or byproducts. So you can easily find these props at Walmart or online or from your own pantry or maybe from your own children's toy collections. This is something that you can sort of build up over time as well. The idea is that each resource photo should be matched with a base or a raw product and then at least with one byproduct. You can pare this down according to the time constraints that you're working with. So setting this up will be more difficult than it has been in the past. Here you can see some teachers in a training working together to make these decisions around a table. And here in this photo, you can see I am teaching this lesson to students in a past pre-COVID situation. And while the students are engaged and obviously very excited, social distancing is not happening. So you will have to get creative and you will have to think through how to make this possible and accessible to all of your students. But I would suggest maybe assigning one or two good leaders in the class to be the ones that manipulate the objects. Or you can give each student a couple of items and then they will take turns coming to the pictures, get input from their classmates, and then place the item on the resource that they think it belongs to. So I'm going to go through a few examples just to give you an idea of how this works. And back to our lesson on page 4. All of the pictures also come with some commodity facts and product matches so that you have some background information to go along with the lesson. Okay, so you can go about this a couple different ways. You can start by already presetting the objects into byproducts and raw products. And the first thing the students can do is separate the objects or the raw products based on what comes from a plant and what comes from an animal. If you are working with an older group, you might also just leave everything in the bag together, and then they might sort out what they feel like is the raw product from the byproduct later on in the lesson. Okay, so we're going to jump into our first raw commodity, or our first base product. And again, this is going to seem a little bit silly just because we don't have an audience to reciprocate with. But here is the first item, and of course your students are going to tell you that this is a peanut, and then you will find the peanut plant photo, and the students will lay this raw product, or this prop of a raw product, on that photo. Then they will also look at the selection of other items and see if there's anything here that looks like it could be a byproduct of the raw peanut. And here we have Virginia salted peanuts. This is considered a byproduct because it has gone through some processing, a roasting process, salting, and packaging. So this is a byproduct of the peanut. Let's go next to this girl. Most of your students will just say that this is a cow, but it is actually a dairy cow. And the main difference is in their milk production. This particular dairy cow is called a Holstein, and that is probably the most common type of dairy cow that you will see on any American farm. So, dairy cattle's milk is higher in butterfat, and that's why it makes great dairy products. And you might ask the students to name off some dairy products that they can think of. Maybe cheese, ice cream, butter might come to mind. So we'll set her aside, and then we'll look at our selection to see if we have anything that might be a dairy product or a milk byproduct. And we have sweet cream unsalted butter. So that is going to be the byproduct that goes with our dairy cow. Next, we have an ear of corn. Now this will be a good discussion around renewable energy and energy sources. Corn, the majority of corn that is grown in the U.S. is actually a different variety that is grown for livestock animals and for ethanol production and for ecoplastics. The type of corn that we eat, like out of a can or off a cob, is a sweet corn variety, which is different from what I'm holding here. So this one usually trips up the students because I'll bring this cup here that is actually made from 100% U.S. corn plastic, and they wouldn't know that unless they saw the sticker on the side or if they looked at the imprint on the bottom of the cup. But that makes for a unique and interesting conversation on biodegradable plastics. Then finally we have a flower, and what's left is an apple. So the flower is representative of a blossom. So we can talk about life processes here, and we can talk about the life cycle or the life chain of an apple, and how a flower will eventually turn into a fruit. So that just gives you an idea of how you might navigate through this lesson. There are many different directions you could take working beyond it. You could research other byproducts from the plants and animals in the pictures. You could pick one of the commodities grown in Virginia and develop a raw commodity to byproduct chain. You could even lead into a discussion around the ingenuity of scientists and inventors who figured out how to best utilize these plants and animals to help people. The peanut would be a perfect example to bring in historical or social studies reference to George Washington Carver. This is a great book here called A Weed is a Flower, and this is a biography on his life. And of course, George Washington Carver came up with over 200 different ways to use the peanut. So the beauty of Resource Roundup is that this lesson is easy to make on your own, and it's easy to gear to the specific needs of your students. Next, we're going to move on to our second lesson, which is called Farm Charm. Farm Charm hits on some similar concepts as Resource Roundup, but is more appropriate for an early learner audience, such as maybe kindergarten through second grade. Both of these activities are a hit with students that I see, but the Farm Charm has a take-home item, and as you all know, students love having something tangible to reinforce those concepts and honestly to show off. Here is a photo of me with a group of kindergartners. As you can see, they are all very proud of their farm in a bag. This lesson helps students to understand the basic needs of animals, the importance of a clean and healthy environment, and again, the interdependency of all environmental factors and the responsibility of humans to be good stewards of the land and the living things that are on it. So the first thing that you'll do with your students is make a list of animal needs or a list of things that would be essential to a good farm. These things might include air, food, water, shelter, space or habitat. And this would be a good time to discuss also, how is it that farmers provide those needs to their animals? So we're going to start with just these little jewelry bags that you can get at Walmart or Michael's for a few dollars. So the jewelry bag represents the farm as a whole. So the first thing the students are going to do when they receive their bag is they're going to pop it open and put a puff of air down into the bag to open it up. That air represents the oxygen that is needed for plants and animals to breathe and to survive. The first thing that our farm needs is this blue bead. What do you all think the blue bead represents? That's right. The blue bead represents fresh water. Fresh water for all the plants and animals that live on the farm. The next thing that we have here is a brown bead. Now at this point the students are going to start understanding what's happening, and they may conclude that it represents the soil, and they would be correct. And of course you can go into more detail about each basic need. The next thing we're going to add is this piece of green ribbon. Now just as a side note, I could use another green pony bead, but I just like to add something different to add some variety to the shape and texture of the items in their farm charm. So the green ribbon represents all of the crops, the grass, the trees, all of the plant life on the farm. The next thing we have is this feather, again with the unique textures. So the students might say that it represents birds. And that's true, but broadly we're saying that the feather represents animals. Now, it doesn't just represent farm animals, and that's something that's really important to get across to our students, is that it's not only just farm animals that live on a farm. There are a host of domestic and wild animals that exist on a farm and depend on the farm's resources to live. The next thing we're going to add is this red square. Now, the students might get a little bit confused by this one, so it's okay to throw a hint out there and say, well, what on a farm is big, square, and red? And they might come up with a barn, and that's right. This barn represents shelter. Now, an important note to add here is that some farm animals do require this shelter in order to get out of the weather or away from predators, but other animals on the farm are not subject to those threats. All right, the last and maybe the most important part of the farm charm is the googly eye. What do we think the googly eye represents? The googly eye represents the watchful eye of the farmer, the watchful eye of the farmer. So the farmer looks after and takes care of all of the plants and animals on the farm. So that's a really important piece. Now the students will take their Ziploc bags and zip it up really tight to keep their farm safe. Finally, we're going to add a pipe cleaner. So you can, ahead of time, you can have a hole punched in the bag. Pipe cleaners will also puncture this type of bag really easily. So we'll just coil this around, and then we have this handy dandy farm charm. If you really want to splurge, you can add an additional pipe cleaner and make a necklace, but this hangs really nicely off the wrist, or you can hook it onto their book bag like a keychain. I added a little sticker here with a horse on it so they remember the farm charm. And this is a great item for them to take home and recall the lesson to someone at home, whether it be a guardian or a sibling or a grandparent. And then from this, it would be good to start talking about basic needs personally, and maybe what would be in their own personal charm. So that concludes today's lesson overviews. Again, please check back on our playlist as time goes on for updates and additions to our virtual professional development. And also engage with us on our Facebook page, Virginia Agriculture in the Classroom. We would love to hear from you and hear your feedback. You can also contact us through our website, agintheclass.org. And you can email us at AITC@vafb.org. Thank you, and see you again in a future video.